Hello, friends, and welcome back to Market Shares. I'm your host, Tony Blodgett, and today I'm going to talk about social media. You know, social media can be a great way for people to engage with their audience, to educate people about products and programs or whatever it is that they're passionate about, but it also has some risks associated with it, especially when professionals decide to engage in what can be considered controversial topics. So today, I'm going to walk through 8 things that I think that every professional that's leveraging social media as a platform to grow their business should keep in mind. And some of these things are going to be very obvious, and you're going to be like, yeah, well, of course, you shouldn't do that. But some of these things may be, you may not have thought about some of these things. So I hope you enjoy this episode. We're going to go through this pretty quickly, but I think that it's super relevant, especially here in 2026, where it's almost impossible to talk about current world problems that are going on in, just around the globe today. Anything that's in the news today, for whatever reason, has some form of controversy tied to it. There's going to be differing opinions on both sides of almost everything that is headline news right now. And so there's a lot of opportunity for people to step on landmines if you're not careful. And all the work you've done to build your social credibility by utilizing social media can all be erased with just one mistake. So let's jump into it. The first thing I want to point out, which I think is obvious, but it may not be, and people may tend to forget this, but social media is obviously public, most of it, and it's permanent, meaning the things that you do on social media create a footprint that does not go away. You may think that you could just delete a post. I've seen people do this, right? And look, I think we've all been there where you see somebody put something on social media. Maybe it was late on a Friday night or something, right? Who knows if they were in the right mind frame to be posting on social media, and you're like, oh my God, I cannot believe they said that. There's no way they're going to leave that up. Click, and we screenshot it, right? Now it's captured. They can delete it, but it's still there, and that might get shared amongst peers or other people. We've all seen this happen. But not only that, the things that we post, they're on our wall, right? If you're on Facebook, if you're on Instagram, people can go back and find them, and it's more permanent than you think. And it's not just the posts that you make. It's also the comments that you might make on other people's posts. It's even the likes when you're liking someone's content. It absolutely is there. People can find it. And not only can they find it, keep in mind, it's presented to people differently. Oftentimes you'll look at a post and you'll be like, oh, there's 8,000 comments on that. Like, there's no way someone's going to see my comment. Well, social media knows who your friends are, and they know that you want to see what your friends are saying. So guess whose comments always pop to the top whenever you're looking at, one of these posts. Even though it has 8,000 people, your friends are going to see yours first. And you may not realize that. Maybe you do. Some people don't consider that, and they might think they can kind of hide in plain sight. I promise you, it's not as easy as you think. So people that you do business with in real life, not on social media, they're going to look at your social media. And whatever you put there, it's there forever. Maybe you can delete it, but chances are there's going to be a footprint somewhere, and you got to think about that. Number 2, this is pretty obvious, but based on the activity that I see in people's social media feeds, I don't think they, think that this is true. But polarizing content can alienate potential clients. Like, you think? But people oftentimes want to share their opinion. And look, I got to be honest with you. Like, this is America, right? This is a free country. Our First Amendment in the Constitution talks about our freedom of speech. And it's that important to the fabric of this country. However, just because you have the right to say something does not mean that it's the right thing to say. And with so many polarizing topics out there, it's much better from a business perspective to be neutral with your content that you're putting out on social media. Matter of fact, I think that it's the easiest thing to do and the safest thing to do is just not engage in any content that has the potential of being controversial. Not because you don't have an opinion, but because you have the I wouldn't even say possibility, the high likelihood that your opinion, although you're free to have it, is going to alienate a good percentage of your potential clients or referral partners. And I just think that people need to give this a little bit more thought when they're posting on social media. Number 3, if you're in mortgage and real estate, there's actually risk, to your job for posting things on social media if you're not careful. Now, I think a lot of loan officers, like we all know that you can't post an interest rate on social media without, disclosing an APR, right? That's like the most obvious thing. You also can't say we have the best or the lowest, right? There's key words that you can't use in your post. And I think most loan officers, we take CE classes every year, we're aware of these things. But you also need to realize that in addition to your clients looking at your social media, not just because they stumble across it, but because people research you today. There are things that can cost you that transaction. They can cost you a relationship, and it can even cost you your job, because some companies actually require that you are connected with their corporate social media so they can see your stuff. But even if you're not, it is their responsibility to monitor the activity of their employees, because when you're representing your company on your social media, that is marketing on behalf of the company. And so many people don't think about it this way, but companies do think about it that way, and they have to protect their own risk and exposure. And so it's incumbent on them to have policies and practices in place to monitor their people's social media. Now, I don't think they're like trying to get you in trouble, but they want to make sure that people are following proper practices, because if they're not, from a regulatory perspective, that can actually come back on the company, believe it or not. And so there is real risk to your business. There's real relationship risk, reputational risk, and frankly, there's things that you could put on social media that could get you fired if you're not really careful. One other thing I'll mention about this is that our industries are heavily regulated, fair lending, fair housing, all the things, around that. And so you got to be careful that when you're engaging in social media, sometimes you may think that your opinion is not impacting some of the other compliance rules that exist within our industry, but indirectly they might be. And so that's another thing to be very mindful of. Number 4. The algorithms on social media, and I think this is obvious, but again, maybe not. The algorithms reward emotion, not professionalism. So whenever there is, like, you may be a person who posts on social media on a regular basis, and let's say that you don't get a lot of engagement on your posts. So, you put something out about your business or about something just very benign, and the only people that like it or comment on it are your mom, your aunt, right? That close friend that you might have. And you're like, look, I only get 3 or 4 people that even look at my stuff on social media. So if I were to say something, share my opinion about something that could be deemed controversial, no one's going to see it anyway, because no one ever sees my social media. But here's the challenge. As soon as there is a negative comment, or there is an angry face, right? Anything that's controversial on that post, all of a sudden they're like, oh, this might be controversial. Let's show it to more people and see. And the engagement will grow. So the algorithms are built in such a way that whether you're sharing something that could be considered controversial, or you're engaging in content, other people's content that is controversial in nature, it gets elevated into everyone else's news feed. And now all of a sudden, thinking that you're not having much of a bright light out there in social media, all of a sudden, all the lights, it's like the spotlights came on and you're, caught, right? Because everyone sees it all of a sudden. So keep in mind that when you're engaging in content or posting content that could be seen as controversial, then that is going to get highlighted by the algorithms. Also, I think this is pretty obvious, but when you stick to professional content on your social media, this is going to build universal trust between your referral partners, your clients, your employer, right? I mean, there's only upside to sticking to positive, professional types of posts on social media. And so there are lots of benefits to doing that. So stick to the things that you know, stick to things that you're passionate about. And if you're in the mortgage and real estate industry, you've gained so much knowledge over the years doing your job. Even if you're fairly new to this industry, I promise you, you know significantly more than someone who's not in this industry. So stick to messages that are educating the public, that are informing them about things they may not be aware of. Feel free to, chime in on opinions about, things that are relevant to our industry that are non-controversial. That's going to help build trust with the people who go and research you, not break down that potential for a relationship. Number 6, likes, shares, and comments matter. I touched on this just a minute ago, but people forget about this. We've seen, I'll use an extreme example. Like there's been Hollywood celebrities who have literally been canceled. Not that I'm a huge fan of just canceling people, but it's happened. People have been absolutely shunned from their industry simply by liking someone's comment that was controversial. And that's an extreme example, right? But it points out the fact that even liking or sharing someone's content, even if it's not yours, it does point to your opinion about a particular matter, and it could absolutely alienate your clients, your referral partners, your friends, your family, your employer, if you're doing that. So keep in mind, likes, shares, and comments are just as important to be careful with. People think, I can just kind of hide back here. I'm not going to share my opinion. I'm just going to like this and like that. And, hint at it. It's way more than a hint, especially when it's one of those very controversial topics that seems to be everywhere in today's world. I also spoke about this, but number 7 is that clients research you online. And I think it goes deeper now than just a client, meeting you. And look, I do this, I get introduced to someone, I'm told about someone, first thing I do, if it's in a professional environment, I go straight to LinkedIn. I want to look at their LinkedIn, boom. Then I go over to Facebook. I want to look at their Facebook. I want to go to their Instagram. I want to see who it is I'm doing business with. I go to their YouTube channel, are they producing content? What are they saying? What does that look like? So to think that people aren't researching you online is foolish. And this is where that whole permanent thing comes into play, right? Because people can scroll back. You may think, man, I didn't post that. I posted that 4 years ago. It doesn't depend on how much you post on your social media. It may not be that far back for someone to scroll and find a post from 2021. 4 or 5 years ago. It can happen pretty quickly, especially if they're really going down a rabbit hole trying to research you, which people tend to do. Here's the other thing to think about is that I can do an extensive research on someone via AI. So I can go to ChatGPT or Grok or, Gemini or any of these, AI tools that we have, and I can ask it to do research for me about somebody and source anything that I find that might, that it thinks might be controversial or things that I might want to be aware of if I'm doing business with this person. Just think of the prompts that you could put into AI to ask it to go do that research for you. Now, I don't know that that's a regular practice by a lot of people, but it's certainly possible. And my guess is we see more of that happening in the future. So you can't hide from this stuff, and it can be a bummer. I get it. You're like, I just want to be myself, but when you're in the public eye, when your business is based on referrals and relationships, unfortunately, you don't get to do that. Now, I would say that if you're in a setting where you can have an actual conversation with someone, right? I mean, you've all heard people talk about, look, email is the worst type of communication because you can't communicate your emotion, right? You can't share your body language. You can't, there's so many things that get lost when you're just texting someone or emailing someone. Well, social media is just another form of texting or emailing. There's very little context that can be provided in a quick, short post. Now, if you're in an environment where you're safe, you know the people, and you can engage in a reasonable conversation. I mean, everyone says, oh, never talk about, religion or money or politics. Look, those things are kind of fun sometimes to get into spirited conversations with people about, but, make sure it's someone who's reasonable and engaging in conversation, and, be respectful, be open-minded, show with your words and your body language that, look, I just want to understand your opinion. I'll share with you my opinion. I think there can be very healthy exchange about what could be considered maybe controversial topics in the right setting. Social media is not that right setting. Matter of fact, it's kind of the worst setting, especially today. It is. And so keep that in mind. Context collapse is real. So what this is kind of referring to is that a lot of people, when they put together a social media post, they may be thinking about the audience that they're talking to, but they're not thinking about all of their potential audiences. So what I mean by that is, you may be sharing something that you think is something that only your family is going to see. It's like, oh, my family, like I was at my family reunion a week ago, and if I shared this, we were talking about this in that setting, and they're going to love this little, whatever, right? And in your mind, you're thinking about this small group of people on your social media, your friends list, whatever you want to call it, that are going to see this and really get it. It's almost like an inside joke. But over here, you have your business partners, you have your coworkers, you have all these other audiences that are like, what is this even talking about? Or vice versa, right? You might have, comments that are really geared towards, referral partners or towards customers or whatnot. And you're in your mind, you're thinking, I'm speaking to this audience, but you gotta remember that every audience is going to have access to that. So you gotta be mindful of the, the real collapse of your intent when it comes to what you're talking about. And the last thing, sorry, that was the last one. That was number 8, collapse of context. And I think that's an important one. So look, just to summarize, you got to treat social media in my opinion, treat social media as a professional platform, right? We all have the right to freedom of speech. We all have our own opinions and personalities. And I know that we want to share those, but I would caution you against being too much, of sharing your opinion about controversial things on a social media platform. I would be neutral and I would be professional in those settings, especially if you are making your living by serving the general public, by building relationships with potential referral partners and business acquaintances and coworkers. If all of those things are important to you, which I know that they are, then I would choose carefully how you choose to use these platforms. I would just avoid engaging in polarizing topics at all. I wouldn't comment on them. I wouldn't like them. I wouldn't unlike them. I wouldn't do it. I just wouldn't engage. I suggest you just not engage in things that can be polarizing, because one way or another, you're going to alienate a decent percentage of the people who you want to be your future clients. I would stay focused on what you know best. I would educate, I would inform, talk about the industry that you know, that you're passionate about, that is bringing value to your audience. And I would stick to that lane when it comes to social media. Or I think it's totally fine to, share your family, right? Give people a view into the day of the life, of you, your kids, if you want, pets, things of that nature, things that kind of show your personality, maybe, a hike that you're on, show that you enjoy hiking, or hobbies that you're engaged with. I think all that's fine. I think all that actually is good. It can help you build that relationship before you ever meet the person. But just stay away from the controversial stuff. And then just know that it's up to you to protect your reputation. And it does not, you could work so hard to build a professional reputation utilizing social media as a platform to do that. And it only takes 1 or 2 errors in judgment that can erase all of that and potentially ruin your credibility. So it's all things that we need to take seriously. Look, I'm guilty at times of wanting to engage in things that I know might be controversial. And my thought is well, I can just kind of thread the needle here. Like I can stay very neutral in what it is that I say. But even then, I just think that it's so dangerous, because even when you're being neutral, the reality is everyone's looking at that going, what are they really saying? Like they have to have an opinion about this. And even if you're not giving an opinion in the post, the fact that you're engaging means that it's meaningful to you, and the audience will decide which way they feel like your opinion is, and then it could still alienate people simply because of that. I know it's not fair, but it is the reality. So better safe than sorry, and just avoid altogether. You guys, with that, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something here, and maybe it wasn't new ideas, but it made you go, maybe I need to think a little bit more before I engage and how I engage. And if you know somebody who you think could benefit from this message, please share this with them. Share this on social media. Let them know, this is a potential we all need to be better at. This isn't pointing fingers. We all need the reminder. Another reminder is that we record a new episode here at Market Shares every single Friday. It comes out at 10 a.m. So if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe to the channel, because we got a lot more coming in 2026. Take care.